Today, we're talking about something that sits quietly underneath so many relationship struggles, but rarely gets named out loud. And that's shame. Not guilt, which is, I've done something wrong, but a deeper, more painful feeling of, there's something wrong with me. And the tricky thing about shame is it seeps into our relationships in how we argue, how we withdraw, how we reach for each other or don't. So in this episode, we're going to explore what shame looks like in relationships, how it shows up in different ways, and most importantly, what helps. Because the goal isn't to get rid of shame entirely, but to change how it's held between you and for you each to be some of the antidote to your partner's shame. Do stay tuned because at the end we have our top 3 takeaway tips to help you with shame in your relationship. Welcome to the Relational Lives podcast. I'm Ali.
And I'm Roz.
And we're both psychotherapists.
This is a podcast about the complexities of relationships and how trauma, attachment, and lived experience shape how we love and connect.
Because relationships are rarely simple, and we want to give you the understanding to unlock your relationship's full potential.
If you enjoy this show, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on. This also means you'll get notified when new episodes come out.
And we enjoy engaging with our listeners, so do reach out with your comments, or you can email us at relationallives@gmail.com. Hi, Roz.
Hi, Ali.
How have you got over the shame of us just recording a whole episode without pressing record?
This is so true. Yes, I'm trying to recover myself now, but it felt pretty shitty inside, I can tell you. I couldn't believe it. And I was thinking about what we both naturally did is we both held our head in our hands. And that's sort of such an image in a way of shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I can't bear to feel these feelings. I can't bear to think of, how horrible this feels.
Yeah.
And yet we both did it, automatically put our head in our hands.
I think mine was just exasperation. But
so yes, we're talking about shame.
A little bit of guilt in there of, oh, shit, I didn't press record.
Press the button. Wow, it could have been either of us, couldn't it? So anyway, we've already done an episode, which nobody will hear, about shame, but this is the episode that you are going to hear because this is the one that's actually recorded.
This is the new and improved episode.
Yeah. So let's talk about shame, Ali. Let's talk about what shame is.
Let's do that. Okay, so shame, as we said in the intro, is this feeling that you are a bad person in some way, or there is something flawed about you. That deep sense of there is something bad or wrong or flawed about me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas guilt is, I have done something wrong or bad. More of a behavioural focus.
Yes, quite different, isn't it? I've done something bad. And so if I've done something bad, if I've done a bad behaviour, I've got the opportunity to recognise that, feel it. It doesn't feel great. But I've got also the chance to do something about it, to make it better, to repair in some ways. So it's a really helpful thing sometimes, I think, guilt, to be able to identify that.
I didn't forget to press record. Well, you didn't actually, the next time. It's a motivator with guilt, isn't it? It can be a motivator.
It is. We will never, ever forget to press record again.
No.
So
but
that's
shame is never motivating.
Yeah. No. Shame and it can feel horrible, can't it? It can feel really crushing and something that's because you feel like, you believe you're bad or wrong or ugly or whatever it is that you're telling yourself, that's caught up in that shame. It's it just feels like you don't want anybody to see it. It feels so horrible.
Yeah. Definitely want to hide that thing because the feeling of it being exposed is just like, crushing. It's like a cold sweat can go over you, can't it?
Yeah.
But as we said also in the intro, shame is quite often at the core of a lot of relationship difficulties, and it's not necessarily seen as that.
No, it can be masked, basically, can't it? Wrapped up in different behaviours and different interactions. And we've talked about it in a previous episode about the negative cycle that can take place in a relationship, haven't we? And so, those listening, you might recognise some of the things we're going to talk about now, which is how it can show up in a relationship. So you're not seeing the shame, but you're seeing things to mask it, to cover it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Within yourself or maybe within your partner.
Mm-hmm. So I know that Dr. Brené Brown, who's a researcher, she's done a lot of research on shame, hasn't she? And she talks about the differences between shame, how it shows up in men and how it shows up in women.
Yes, which is very relevant to relationships because men and women are in relationships, whether it be same-sex ones or heterosexual relationships.
Exactly.
So, yeah, there's different themes that often show up, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. So and again, if you're listening to this, see if any of these kind of resonate with you. So for women, it can be very much about trying to be really good, managing everything, but also how it can show up in body appearance, how you look, how you feel about yourself, and again, how that then might be that you're covering that up. And the behaviours that appear in the relationship where you're working really hard at trying to get everything right and be the best you possibly can because you don't want to kind of show what's going on underneath.
Let's just slow that down then, because when you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, I can relate to some of that. As a female, the need to look a certain way and to be kind and to be gentle and helpful and all those things that we've been conditioned to be.
But to thinking about what you've just said, those are lovely qualities as well.
They are.
So if you're showing up and those are important values to you, important ways to be in and be in relationship, and you want to be like that there's a difference, isn't there, between that and those being a cover up to I'm bad underneath. And if I don't show these things, somebody's going to see that I'm bad underneath.
Yeah, if I'm not being kind and considerate and helpful and perfect, oh my goodness, they're going to see this horrible side to me that I don't want anyone to see.
So Brené Brown also talks about men's ways that shame can kind of show up, doesn't she? And that can be more a sort of perceived weakness that they have. And so they can withdraw, shut down, become defensive, try and fix, I guess, is another way, isn't it?
Because if they get the feeling that they are being seen as weak, which is that at the core of a lot of men's shame, I am weak, that if they get the sense that someone is seeing that within them, then these behaviors will come in a way to keep the person away from the feeling of I'm weak, or to and to try and keep themselves away from feeling weak as well.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a double whammy, isn't it? So, like you say, either their own perception of themselves or an external perception. And that might be that it isn't actually that somebody's saying anything to do with them being weak, but how they're hearing that or seeing that signal somehow activates that belief they are wanting to not go to that place of feeling all those horrible feelings around shame. And so then will behave in those ways, i.e. the withdrawal, the shutdown, being angry or defensive.
Right. So an example could be, let's say, the partner with the male partner in this example, will say, has a shame around I'm weak. And they've just made a cup of tea for their partner. And she or he says, oh, you didn't put enough milk in my tea. that in itself could be enough to just tap into that shame around being weak or not good enough.
Mm-hmm. And then the reaction from that, in order not to show or feel the shame, could be defensive. Well, I was making you a nice cup of tea or whatever, and, you're so ungrateful. Blame can come in.
Well, you didn't get the right milk. You haven't got the right milk in the fridge, or any kind of way of just keeping that feeling away from themselves because that shame is so painful and needs to be hidden.
Yeah, let's deflect away from it because it's horrible. It's horrible feeling it. Yeah.
And the way that people defend from the shame, the way that people protect themselves from feeling it is so not vulnerable, isn't it? It's usually quite blunt and aggressive and spiky.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't endear the other person to come near and say, hey, is everything okay?
Yeah. Which then again reinforces in a way, doesn't it? I guess not only because I think we can get into these cycles, can't we? We've talked about negative cycles in a previous episode, and how it's very easy to get caught up in what is sort of on the top of the cycle, where it's those negative behaviors like the defensiveness or the criticism or the gaslighting or whatever it might be. And you're right. Why would you want to go close to somebody who's being defensive or criticizing, or what you're hearing is criticism? Why would you want to go close to that? And it's very disconnecting, isn't it? But it does keep you away from, you won't see what I'm really thinking about myself underneath.
Yeah. You won't see you won't see me. You won't see me. But that's exactly that. It's disconnecting, isn't it? I don't want you to see me in this way.
And it stops that kind of flowing then of a conversation, doesn't it? It stops the sort of way that we can connect if we share more difficult feelings, if we share more vulnerable feelings. Instead, it's kind of sort of spiky and sharp in some respects, or can be.
Yeah, shame can really show up in these dynamics, can't it? But very often not seen at all.
No.
Not recognized at all.
No. I think another area it can show up is in our in intimacy, in our sexual kind of cycle as well, where depending on how one's feeling, and I was thinking about what Brené Brown has said about women and body image, for instance, and I'm wondering if that's, an area that it can show up. It's like, not wanting to be seen and feeling very exposed in an intimate setting, with your partner, and that shame kind of coming to a little bit more of the surface, and how people might then push it back down because you don't want to be seen as that ugly or whatever negative belief you're having person.
Yeah. I'm sure it's very common. It comes into the sexual cycle for men as well.
Yeah.
That may be more around performance. And being...
I was thinking that as you were saying that. Yeah.
So we're talking about some of these examples we're giving here about how it can show up in the different interactional dynamics in a couple. But shame can also come in a lot bigger ways, can't it, in a relationship? If someone is, has perhaps deep-seated shame, and they have learned ways that help them keep away from that feeling, help them feel better about themselves in the short term, which can then lead to addictive behaviors. They can be lots of different ways, can't they? So it could be addicted to substances, or it could be behavioral addictions such as porn use, shopping, perfectionism, workaholism.
Yeah. And it's really hard, isn't it? Because you can understand that because of the feelings that we described, which, if you're listening to this, you might be able to sort of understand that kind of crushing feeling we talked about. And when you're feeling that crushing feeling and you have all these negative thoughts about yourself, that you're bad or ugly or whatever it is, it's no surprise that maybe you want a temporary way of some relief from those feelings, something to take you away from it. And that, can be one of the reasons for addiction, can't it? Or some of the behaviors that you've described, Ali. And I think what's so hard with that is it can become a real vicious cycle, can't it? Because you might feel, you might be feeling all the shame feelings. You then go and try and get a temporary escape from it. And then you might come back in home to your relationship and your partner is really unhappy with you because of whatever the behavior is that you've done, drinking or whatever. That sort of addictive behaviors, buying something and you shouldn't have done, or whatever it might be. And then you're getting kind of a really negative response from that. Like, how could you possibly do that? What are you doing to this family, or whatever it is, which can then feed those feelings even more of, I'm a terrible person, I'm so bad. And then again, maybe let's just go out and get a quick fix to try and feel a little relief from this. So that vicious cycle can be a horrible one.
Good point. Good point. It's one thing, isn't it, being having an addiction when you're not in a relationship, because it's only you that has the consequences. But when you're in a relationship, it does affect your loved one and maybe your children if you have children.
Yeah. So the other thing, we've been talking, haven't we, about how difficult it is to show your shame. It feels crushing. It feels terrible. So these hiding behaviors behind the defensiveness or the addiction or whatever it is, these are all, in a way, really understandable protections from shame, which usually is something that is kind of long-standing. It's probably something that you gathered a long time ago and then gets sort of activated in our current relationship, even without us sometimes realizing it.
It's likely to have started a long, long time ago and then get layered upon as you go through your adulthood, isn't it? There's other things that you can kind of add on and reinforce the feelings, because it's like you have this bias to looking for the evidence that supports your shame. Whilst it's deeply hidden, there's a tendency to be seeing the information that reinforces it.
Yeah. Which makes sense, doesn't it? Because if it's something we're familiar with, why wouldn't we be kind of thinking, well, that must be it. I must be bad. I must be ugly. I must be whatever the negative belief is. Yeah.
And also discounting or filtering out any evidence to the contrary, which is why it can feel like nothing is ever enough to make you feel. So people might reassure you and say, oh no, I don't know what you're talking about, there's nothing wrong with your eyes or whatever the thing is. But it's not enough, because it goes deeper than that. And also you're going to filter out any of those positive signs because it's not what you believe about yourself.
And so you're not going to believe somebody else. No. And this can show up, can't it? Shame can show up often in our therapy rooms, can't it? Whether it's, in all sorts of different ways, but in infidelity, for instance, that's one way it can show up, can't it? And again, a little bit of a reinforcement there, where the thing that somebody's done can then be really hurtful to another. And then the partner who is the one who's betrayed can react in a certain way, which then can feed the feelings that I'm terrible, I'm a really bad person, I've done this awful thing. Yeah. So that separation, there might have been an awful thing that's been done, but it doesn't mean to say you're a bad person. Yeah. And that's the distinction, I think, isn't it? Again.
Yeah. It's a behavior that's not great, but it doesn't mean that you are at your core a bad person. Yeah. This is something we will cover in another episode, specifically on betrayal trauma, betrayal recovery. So we won't go too much into that, but it's very common, isn't it, Ros, that shame is underpinning some of these behaviors.
Yeah. And I think what's important is to say about the hope, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the hope is that once you recognize this is there, once you can see this is a part of what's going on for you, it's possible to change it. All the while it's so hidden, it's never going to be able to be changed. It's really hard because you're going to have to shine a spotlight on it yourself and go, okay, this is here, and want to change it, to change how you see yourself. And often you might need help for that.
Yeah. Yeah, because in a relationship, it's hard sometimes to recognize those things that are going on and what's underneath, isn't it? And also, I think, in the protection of oneself, trying to keep the shame hidden, not sharing those more difficult, more vulnerable feelings, you think that it's not impacting anybody else. But in fact, it is. It's sort of reorganizing the whole relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's what can be really important to address.
Yeah.
And so the hope is that it absolutely can be addressed.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely it can. I've seen people be transformed by being able to look at themselves and sort of address and process where the shame came from, but also to start to, I don't know, look at themselves differently through a different lens.
Yeah. So do you think that's a good point, Ali, to go to our 3 top takeaway tips?
Yes, let's do that.
3 top takeaway tips.
Takeaway tip number 1. Firstly, and most importantly, is to recognize your shame and name it as that. So instead of hearing your self-talk as I'm a terrible person, I'm a bad person, or I'm a weak person, reframe it as my shame tells me that I'm a terrible person, or I'm ugly, I'm useless, I'm weak, or not enough, whatever it is. It's just giving yourself that bit of distance between this is what it is and I see it as that. It's not I am that.
Takeaway tip number 2. Shame thrives in secrecy and hiding. The antidote to shame is to bring yourself out of the hiding and share your shame with someone who has empathy and compassion. Shame withers when it's met with empathy, and it might not feel like it will, but it really does. So start small, choose someone who you feel safe with, because you don't want to push yourself so far out of your comfort zone that you just retreat back to hiding again.
And if you're the partner and you're seeing potential behaviors that might be covering up shame in your partner, for example, with the tea example we gave earlier, try to see the vulnerability and pain beneath the behavior, because you can be the antidote to your partner's shame. It can be very difficult, but if you can discuss it together, you might be able to come to some shared understanding of what really is beneath the reactive behaviors. So, for example, with the tea, you might be able to say, that seemed like quite a big reaction. I wonder what's beneath that. But maybe before that, sharing this episode, if you think your partner would be willing to listen, because it would be helpful for them to get some sense of what you're on about when you're saying that. Yeah.
Thanks, Ali.
It's a big topic.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
Lots more that we could say on this.
Yeah. So if you do know anybody, or if you've experienced some of this yourself, these are perhaps some tips that you can identify, work with. And also, if you know of anybody else who you experience that you think actually they might be feeling shame underneath, not just your partner, but do share it with your friends, share it with people you know. The more we get this out, the better. And so remember also to like and subscribe and to give us a 5-star review. The 5-star reviews really help us get this out to other people.
And it makes us feel good. It covers up our shame. Gives us a bit of a dopamine hit.
Yes, even if it's temporary.
And we love to hear
thank
from
you for listening. Yeah, we do. Thank you for listening and join us on our next episode. Thanks, Ali.
See you next time, Ros.
I look forward to it.